Good morning. I'm the Reverend John Guttermann. I'm a covenant minister at the United Church of Christ in New Brighton, and what that actually means is that I'm not a pastor there. They send me other places, so I'm here today. And the work that I primarily do is on immigration and immigration reform. I also work on other justice issues for my denomination and with other organizations. Truly, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. As a pastor of the United Church of Christ, a denomination with roots in both the Reform and Lutheran traditions, and with similar roots reflected in my own faith life, I bring greetings from the Minnesota Conference, United Church of Christ, and our new conference minister, the Reverend Sherry Presteman. I also bring you greetings from Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Service, President Linda Hartke, and the LIRS staff. LIRS is a national leader serving immigrants, children, and refugees, and has funded Minnesota's Community Support Initiative for Immigrants in Detention, including Conversation with Friends, the immigrant detainee visit program that I lead. Let us take a moment to draw together around a brief excerpt from the Gospel. These are the words of Matthew 2:13 and 14. Now after the wise men had left, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I tell you, for Herod is about to search for the child to destroy him." Then Joseph got up, took the child and his mother by night, and went to Egypt, and remained there until the death of Herod. Joseph took the child and his mother by night and went to Egypt, and migrated to Egypt, or immigrated from his homeland to Egypt. The annual production of the Christmas Epiphany story presented by St. Paul's Lutheran Church in Minneapolis is called La Natividad, and is an interactive bilingual experience telling the Christmas story through the eyes of an immigrant family in America. The players themselves are immigrants. In an interview published at the LIRS website, Pastor Hansel gives his reading of the scene that we just talked about. Soon after Jesus' birth, he says, they are hunted by a mad king, becoming refugees in another country. And the king sees not just that one baby, but all babies are in the area are a threat and attacks. The story of Joseph and Mary taking their son Jesus to refuge in Egypt reminds us that migration stories are at the core of the biblical tradition. 54 immigration-related biblical Bible stories and references are cited on one list. Matthew 25:35, I was a stranger and you welcomed me. And surely, though the text is silent, Jesus' family found welcome and respite in Egypt. Migration stories are also at the core of many of our denominational stories. In a message on immigration, the ELCA's response to the 1997 Churchwide Assembly call for a reflection on the church and immigration, Lutherans are reminded that they are an immigrant church. And I think, in fact, all denominations need to be reminded that we are immigrant churches. That following World War II, they are reminded that 1 out of every 6 Lutherans in the world was a refugee or displaced person, and that thousands of Lutheran congregations work to welcome and resettle these immigrants. And that this history is a reminder that hospitality for the uprooted is a way to live out the biblical call to love the neighbor in response to God's love in Jesus Christ. I still remember the first time that I read that paper and read those words, and it was extraordinarily exciting because of all the papers that I have read about immigration, this was the first denomination to identify itself as an immigrant community. The Bible's gold standard text on immigration is Leviticus 19:33 to 34. When the alien resides with you in your land, you shall not oppress the alien. The alien who resides with you shall be to you as the citizen among you. You shall love the alien as yourself, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. First time I heard those words in an immigration rally, they were spoken by a rabbi who tested to the power that those words held for the Jewish community. And they've held power for me ever since. Yes, nations have a right to control their borders, but the scriptural norm is welcome, which is expressed as hospitality, respect, fair treatment. But since the shock of 9/11, the United States has violated the biblical imperative and international law. It has been implementing policies that criminalize immigrants. Immigrants are hunted by armed agents. They attend immigration court hearings wearing shackles and chains on their hands and their feet, and they stand before judges with very little power to adjudicate their individual cases. They are detained in jails and prisons without criminal charges, sometimes for years, and often they are never even allowed to meet in person with their families. Some have had their children taken from them. Some of those children have been adopted out to other families. We are repeating some horrible, ugly parts of our history. History that was experienced by the indigenous peoples and by African Americans. In a 2012 report in the Minneapolis Star and Tribune, we learned how real this became for Pastor Hansel and the people of St. Paul's Lutheran Church. Quoting from there, for the first 3 years La Natividad was performed, Lizette Gomez Vega played Mary, and her husband Delfano Gomez played Jose or Joseph. In 2006, they carried their 1-month-old son, Emiliano. Lizette reprised her role in 2012, although without her husband. While the Obama administration had ordered a review of deportations to focus and was calling for it to focus on dangerous criminals, church council member, father of a U.S. citizen child, Delfino Gomez, was still deported. One of the first things I did as an activist on immigration, and I was working for Church World Service at the time, was to go to Washington, D.C. on March 21st, 2010, where I was part of 250,000 other people urging Congress to act and President Obama to honor his campaign promise to lead for immigration reform. Then, nothing. The same thing had happened in 2007 when President Bush led the call for immigration reform. And today, the fear is that despite the energy for immigration reform that led to a passage to the passage of a bill in the Senate last spring, the same thing might be happening now. Those with the power in Congress and in our communities, the people, the citizens, still do not see that the time for change has come. Dr. Martin Luther King wrote in his letter from a Birmingham jail, which was published in 1963, a little over 50 years ago now. He wrote that letter as a response to a call to unity from 8 white clergymen who, though agreeing with the need for change, argued that the battle against racial segregation should be fought solely, and more slowly in the courts, not in the streets. Yet this was 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. It was 9 years after the Supreme Court decision outlawing so-called separate but equal schools, and it was just 3 months after Alabama Governor George Wallace had declared segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Dr. King's words seem dipped in sadness. He says in the letter, "I must confess that over the past few years I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate who lives by a mythical concept of time and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season." Wait for a more convenient season for immigration reform. Seems to be what we're doing. For over 20 years, our nation has been waiting for a more convenient season for immigration reform. For over 20 years, the need for change has been known. Meanwhile, at the present time, nationwide, 34,400 immigrants are detained right now as we worship together. 34,400. And each one of those beds is required by Congress to be kept full every single night. 1.6 million people have been deported during President Obama's first 4 years in office, more than were ever deported under any previous president. 205,000 parents of U.S. citizen children were deported in the 26 months between July of 2010 and September of 2012. 5,000 children have been put into the U.S. child welfare system due to immigration enforcement action against their parents. In 2012, 409,849 people were deported. The current rate of deportations, even as reform is pending in Congress that might actually stop the deportations were it in effect, is continuing at 1,200 per day. And still immigrants come to this country. They come often like Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, pushed by forces that are beyond their control, seeking safety and opportunity and freedom. Hope is their guiding star. And each follower of that star invites us to stand with them. Without us, there is no welcome. Without us, there will be no change. I think the dogged determination of immigrants to live, work, and raise families in this country is the most hopeful thing we have going for us today. The United States remains their beacon of opportunity, their beacon of hope. Jesus said, "I was a stranger, and you welcomed me." Amen. May it be so.